You're crouched at the mouth of a cave on the southern tip of Africa, 74,000 years ago. The sky hasn't been blue in months. Ash falls like slow snow, and somewhere north of you, a volcano called Toba has just torn a hole in the sky 10,000 times bigger than anything a modern eruption could produce. You have no idea the sun will come back. You just know the tide is going out, and there's food in the rocks. Right now, you can check the weather on your phone before you leave the house. You can drive to a store that has food regardless of season, climate, or disaster. None of that existed for the people crouched in that cave. No forecasts, no supply chains, no backup plan except the ground and the sea in front of them. So how did ancient humans survive massive volcanic eruptions that blacked out the sky for years at a time? In 2018, paleoanthropologist Curtis Marean and his team published findings in Nature after decades of excavation at Pinnacle Point, near Mossel Bay, South Africa. They found something strange in the sediment layers, a fine dusting of volcanic glass, chemically matched to the Toba eruption 74,000 years ago. It sat in layers with stone tools and food waste on both sides of it. Human occupation didn't stop when the ash fell. It continued straight through. That's the hard evidence. Now here's what it means. While ecosystems inland were collapsing under years of volcanic winter, this particular strip of coastline barely noticed. Everyone assumes a global catastrophe means everyone suffers equally. The truth is, survival during Toba came down to real estate. Marean's research shows the southern African coast functioned as a refuge, a place where the usual rules of the disaster didn't apply, because the food source there didn't depend on sunlight and rainfall the way farmland or grazing herds did. That food source was the ocean floor, in walking distance at low tide. A 2010 study by Marean in the Journal of Human Evolution dated systematic shellfish harvesting at Pinnacle Point back to roughly 162,000 years ago, over 80,000 years before Toba even erupted. Mussels, limpets, sea snails, called archaeological, protein-dense, predictable, and completely indifferent to ash in the atmosphere. While the sky was dying, the intertidal zone was still refilling itself twice a day, on schedule, the way it always had. So what changed? Nothing about the ocean did. That was the entire point. A rocky shoreline doesn't care about a volcanic winter. Crops do. Herds do. Humans who understood that distinction outlasted the ones who didn't. But eating shellfish wasn't luck. It required reading the moon, tracking tidal cycles months in advance, and returning to the same reef on the same lunar schedule without a calendar, without writing anything down. That kind of long-range planning is a cognitive leap most people don't associate with the deep ice age. It's usually filed under modern human behavior, and it shows up at Pinnacle Point tens of thousands of years before agriculture, before cities, before almost anything we'd call civilization. Not every group facing a volcanic disaster had that option. Not every group survived one. Fast forward roughly 35,000 years to a different eruption entirely. Around 39,000 years ago, the Campanian ignimbrite eruption tore open the Phlegrean fields near modern-day Naples, Italy, the most explosive eruption Europe has seen in the last 200,000 years. Ash from it has been found as far away as the Russian plains, more than 1,800 miles from the crater. Researchers studying Mezmayskaya Cave in Russia's Caucasus Mountains found two distinct ash layers dated to this period, sitting directly in sediment packed with Neanderthal bones and tools. Below the second ash layer, Neanderthal remains, consistently. Above it, none. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. This wasn't an extinction that happened somewhere else, to someone else. This was a population that had survived in that exact cave through multiple prior climate swings, and then simply stopped appearing in the record after this particular eruption. Everyone assumes the volcano killed them outright. Ash, cold, collapse, done. The truth is more complicated and less cinematic. Climate modeling published by researcher Benjamin Black and colleagues found the sharpest cooling from the eruption, an estimated 2 to 4 degrees Celsius over the following year, actually sidestepped the regions where Neanderthal populations were concentrated. The eruption alone, by that modeling, likely wasn't enough to finish them off. So the volcano wasn't the whole story. Homo sapiens had already arrived in Europe by the time Campanian ignimbrite erupted, already competing for the same land, the same herds, the same caves. The eruption didn't create that pressure. It just landed on top of a species that was already losing ground and removed whatever margin for error was left. 2 species, 2 eruptions. Only one of them had a backup plan. That's the pattern hiding underneath almost every volcanic survival story from deep prehistory. The eruption is rarely the deciding factor by itself. It's a stress test, applied to whatever margin a population already had. Groups with a second food source, a second territory, a second strategy, they absorbed the shock and kept going, sometimes even innovating in the aftermath. At Shinfa Matema, a site in the Ethiopian lowlands where Toba ash also turned up in the sediment. Researchers found evidence that people there adapted by following seasonal rivers and fishing shrinking waterholes through the driest stretches. And around that same window, bow and arrow technology starts appearing in the record. New pressure. New tools. Groups with only one option had nothing to fall back on when that option failed. So how did ancient humans survive eruptions that blacked out the sun for years? Not through toughness alone, and not through luck alone either. They survived by already having built a second door out of the room, long before they ever needed to use it. Go back to that cave on the South African coast. Ash still drifting down over water that doesn't care what the sky is doing. The people crouched there weren't waiting for the volcano to end. They were reading a tide table written in moonlight, one they'd been reading for 80,000 years already. The eruption changed everything above the waterline. It changed nothing below it. We built a civilization that removed almost every one of those second doors. One supply chain, one grid. One growing season standing between comfort and collapse. The real disaster was never the volcano. It's forgetting you need a door that ash can't block.